John Bolton has served at the highest levels of the US administration and in national security. He has advised presidents. He's been involved in key decisions behind some of the country's biggest wars. He has helped shape some of the toughest foreign policy decisions in recent American and world history. He's held the positions of the US ambassador to the United Nations, the Assistant Attorney General, and a national security advisor, among many others. But today he is fighting a different kind of battle, one with the very president who appointed him, Donald Trump. John Bolton has accused Trump of behaving like an autocrat, of chastening personal glory over national and international interests. And now, after backing the boldest US military strike on Iran, he has found himself without protection. He has joined Euronews Albania today for an exclusive interview where we're going to be going into something to do with his relationship with Trump, but also issues which relate to Albania and its place in the Western Balkans. Mr. Bolton, welcome to Euronews Albania. Thank you for your time today. I want to just start with a scene-setting question. You've been a very outspoken critic of President Trump. How do you assess his handling of foreign policy at the moment, particularly vis-a-vis Iran and then Russia and Ukraine? Does he have a plan? Is there some strategy we don't know about, or is it all for personal glory?
Well, there's certainly no coherent strategy overall, and he's active on a variety of different fronts, including things that in the next few weeks I think will be very important, like the tariffs that he's proposed with so many of our trading partners. I think with respect to Iran, the decision to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program was correct. I think it's something that the U.S. and Israel probably should have done long ago, but in any event, it's represented a significant setback for the Iranian effort. We'll see what comes of it. There's no indication yet that Iran realizes that its aspirations for nuclear weapons are a lot farther away today than they were a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. But there are obviously many other things going on that are not so successful, including Trump's inability to get a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, which he had said he would do within 24 hours.
Yes, obviously, we were all waiting with bated breath for that one, but it never quite materialized. I want to just ask another question as well. You recently had your Secret Service protection removed. I mean, how does that feel? But also, do you think that gives a troubling sign to the rest of the world regarding American cohesion?
Right. Well, it was the Secret Service had been sent back to give protection as they had when I served as National Security Advisor because of threats Iran had made on a number of Americans, starting with Trump himself, for the strike against Qasem Soleimani back in 2020. It's I think, a mistake. Obviously, I have a personal interest in it, but it's a mistake to say to America's adversaries that they can make these threats against American officials or former American officials and essentially face no consequences. And I think it's not just Iran that saw that, but our other adversaries as well. So it's a sign of weakness, I think, that they'll try and take advantage of.
Now, I want to ask you a bit about Albania. Albania is one of the most pro-US, pro-NATO countries in the world. It's been a consistent ally of the US as well. It's been facing pretty much daily cyber attacks from Iran, due in part to its hosting of the MEK. And I'm wondering, do you think that Washington puts enough value on what Albania is doing and its allyship with the US? Or do you think Albania is in a slightly more vulnerable position than it realizes?
Well, I think part of the problem with Trump is that he doesn't understand that alliances are mutually beneficial, whether it's the NATO alliance as a whole or our bilateral relations with many countries that are NATO members. And I think the pressure that Iran tries to put on U.S. allies that they don't see adequate response from Washington allows Iran to make progress in its efforts to achieve its objectives in the Middle East that ultimately aren't going to serve anybody, because the threat of Iran's terrorism and the pursuit of nuclear weapons is something that threatens everybody. I think there's been a general lack of attention to many of our allies, and I'd certainly say Albania was one, that deserve more support when they're faced with these threats from rogue states like Iran.
Yeah, I mean, we're being attacked. The Prime Minister has said we're receiving daily attacks on institution websites and networks and things from Iran-backed hackers, which is quite concerning, you know, especially in this very delicate time at the moment. Now, also, I want to ask, during your tenure as the security advisor, did you have any involvement, were you party to any discussions about the situation between Kosovo and Serbia?
Right. Well, there was I was actually involved fairly extensively because the necessity to solve these lingering conflicts in the Balkans, many of them attendant on the breakup of the former Yugoslavia, but many having historical roots that go back much further, should be a higher U.S. priority. I think our friends in Western Europe have made efforts at resolving some of them, but not terribly successfully. So I thought when I was serving as national security advisor, and I think now, that the U.S. could take a more active role. The dispute between Kosovo and Serbia is probably one of the most serious that we face in Europe as a whole. And there have been signs from time to time that the two countries might be close to working out a solution, but it's obviously never come. Even small differences can stop a larger agreement, and we've seen progress on some issues that for the outside world are hard to understand, like the description of what Macedonia's name will be now, the Republic of Northern Macedonia. But solving that showed that despite how long it might take, solutions are there. And if the U.S. As a member of NATO, but also not having any historical stake in conflicts in the Baltics. We don't come with any baggage. If our mediation or assistance or any role we could play would be helpful, I think we should be prepared to do it.
What would your ideal solution for this situation? How would it look? You know, in terms of, I mean, it just seems impossible to satisfy both Kosovo, who is quite stubborn, and you have Serbia, on the other hand, which is also adamant. You know, Kosovo is not a country. It's never going to be a country. How do you see this solution? If you could, you know, have it as you wish, how would it look?
Well, I don't think there are particular positions that the U.S. should advocate that point to making to bringing the problem closer to a solution. But I remember what my former boss, Jim Baker, always used to say about the Middle East, which is also a pretty complicated area. He always said, we can't want peace more than the parties themselves. So ultimately, nobody's going to impose anything from the outside that's going to have any lasting effect. What the outsiders can do is help with bridging proposals and so on, and then helping to say to the parties that can come to the agreement and to other interested spectators that we're going to support the agreement because we think it's going to be conducive to peace and stability, and to say that we recognize the political efforts that went into it. I don't think forcing the sides toward a solution ultimately produces a solution that lasts, but making it clear that we want to help explain to publics in the countries involved why compromises might be necessary after they're made, and support the efforts of leaders in the countries who are willing to make hard choices. That is a role we can play.
I think you're absolutely right there, you know, what you say about imposing things, because the EU has not had any success, and the EU has really tried to impose certain things on Kosovo that the government said no, that people have voted against, you know, and this is why it's reached a stalemate. You know, there's been no progress in, what, a year and a half, maybe longer, I'm not sure, you know, so I appreciate this approach from you. You know, we can't force them. We have to work with them together for what they want and what works for them. It's quite a refreshing stance to hear regarding the situation.
Well, it's when I looked at this in 2018, I thought actually that the leaders in Kosovo and Serbia might have achieved a lot of progress on their own, and that we could bring it to a final conclusion. But it takes political courage because ultimately in a conflict where almost every single aspect of the relationship is contentious, that you're not going to satisfy everybody in your respective domestic constituencies. But if the two governments can arrive at something they consider satisfactory, then I think the U.S. and I think the rest of Europe as well can help say, look, we've all got hard choices to make in life, and the positive consequences of reaching the solution will outweigh the temporary pain that some of the concessions seem to impose.
Yes, no, I agree. Especially the Balkan mentality, if you tell them they have to do something, they're less likely to sort of do it. Now, I want to ask as well, I don't know if you know, so Trump has claimed that he prevented sort of literally an outbreak of war recently between Kosovo and Serbia. We're talking like a proper clash. Do you believe there's any truth to this? Have you heard there's any truth to it? Or is it Trump just sort of running around saying how great he is at, you know, solving the world's problems?
No, I don't think there was really anything close to an outbreak of war coming. I think you know, his private business is looking at investments in the region on a number of fronts, and I think he always finds something to say about his role in things. He just about the same time was claiming he had brought a crisis between India and Pakistan to a successful conclusion as well. You know, he's very interested in winning the Nobel Peace Prize. He's obviously not going to win it for solving the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is not being solved.
No.
So he's looking for something to say, see, here's another justification why I should get the prize.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I laugh, but it just seems such a far-fetched sort of idea to me that he would ever be nominated for something like that. I want to ask, if you were in the White House today, in one of your previous capacities or potentially another, what would your first move to be to reassert that US influence in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe, diplomacy, deterrence, or something more direct? Because I feel the US is kind of losing it a bit here. What would you do to strengthen that? Because obviously this region is very important, particularly in the context of Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, I think there are several things that could be done. I think that overall, U.S. cooperation on the military front could be closer. I think the U.S. defense budget has to be increased to the range of 5% of GDP. It's not just the European NATO allies that need to do that, but I think working more closely with countries that are NATO members is a very tangible way to show American commitment. I think a lot could be done there. I think even just politically important things like more visits by senior administration officials, given particularly the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, I think would help underline how sensitive and important the Balkans are. It's just not been as much of a priority in the White House. Wasn't so much in the first Trump term either, and certainly not during the Biden administration. It's just not something that you can ignore and expect things to go along without consequences.
I read as well that potentially the Trump administration is going to pull out American soldiers from Germany, I think it was, you know, sort of en masse in the near future, thus creating a bit of an issue in terms of Europe. Do you think we're witnessing the end of this traditional alliance between like the NATO and US and then Europe on the other side? Do you still see this alliance as effective, as resilient as it once was?
Well, I think it's become actually more effective and more resilient. We were all happy when Finland and Sweden finally joined, abandoning 7 decades of neutralism to become NATO members. I think the problem is Trump, as I mentioned, doesn't really understand that America's security is enhanced by an effective NATO, not just Europe's security. The risk that he might withdraw remains. But if we were pursuing a sensible strategy in Europe, we'd be celebrating the fact that NATO has expanded and that NATO members have agreed in the Amsterdam summit that they're going to increase military expenditures from the 2% of GDP target that they agreed to in 2014 up to 3.5% of I'll call them real military expenditures, and then another 1.5% on more loosely defined category of expenditures. I think that's important. And I think showing more solidarity with NATO members that the White House could do would help move us more quickly toward that goal.
My last question, because we are running out of time. Trump is unpredictable. The language he uses is not diplomatic. I'll say it as bluntly as I can. Does this scare you slightly? Do you wonder he's going to push it too far with the wrong person, say or do the wrong thing at the wrong time, and everything is going to come crashing down? Is this a concern for you, realistically?
Well, yeah, Trump has never thought strategically. It's all about his personal relationships with foreign leaders. He thinks he's friends with Vladimir Putin. That's a mistake. That's not how Putin sees it. But it means that there is uncertainty in the trajectory that the United States is going to pursue, which is why it's important when he makes a correct decision, like the recent decision to deploy Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, that people say that that's a great decision and push him to do more along a consistent line. We just have to be thinking about that all the time. Trump does not do policy in the sense we conventionally understand that term, and foreign leaders have to grapple with that.
Let's hope they do. We don't wake up to a terrible situation. Mr. Bolton, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks very much for having me.